My name is David Mercer. I'm 36 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but trusting my brother again might just top the list. He called me out of the blue 2 weeks after we buried our mother. Said he wanted to make things right, settle the estate together, maybe even reconnect. I should have known better. But grief does strange things to a man, and when your only remaining family reaches out with what sounds like peace, you want to believe it. We hadn't spoken much over the last few years. John and I were close once, as kids. But as adults, we drifted. Different values, different paths. He'd gone off chasing money and charm, moving from startup to startup out in Atlanta, while I stayed in town fixing engines and trying to stay out of trouble. Still, when he invited me to spend a weekend at the old family house, a chance to go through Mom's things together, as he put it, I said yes. I even convinced myself it would be good for us. So, on a cold Friday morning, I loaded up my truck, packed an old flannel jacket, and brought along a bottle of rye whiskey Mom used to keep hidden behind the tea tins. I figured we'd raise a glass, maybe cry a little, and try to be brothers again. When I pulled into the gravel driveway that led up to the house, the place looked off. I'd grown up here, every summer, every holiday, but the house didn't feel like it remembered me. There was something heavy in the air, not just because of Mom's absence, but something else I couldn't name yet. The front porch light was on even though it was midday, and the curtains were all drawn. I parked and sat there a minute, engine idling, watching my breath fog up the inside of the windshield. No cars out front. That was the first odd thing. John said he'd be here already. I rang the bell. Nothing. I knocked. Still nothing. I reached for my phone, but of course no signal. We were far enough into the mountains that service was always a gamble. I tried the doorknob. It opened. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old wood, but no voices, no movement. I stepped inside, calling John's name. No response. I walked through the main hall, past the living room and into the kitchen. Empty, spotless, like a house waiting for a showing, not a weekend visit. Just as I was about to head back out to my truck and maybe drive into town for a signal, I heard a sound from upstairs. A low scraping noise like something heavy being dragged. My stomach tightened. I grabbed the fireplace poker just in case, call it instincts from working solo in shady neighborhoods too long, and went up the stairs. The noise led me to the old library. The door was open, and there near the window was a man I'd never seen before, sitting in a wheelchair. He was older, maybe in his early 70s, with thinning white hair and a deep scar along his jawline. He was facing the window, hands resting on the wheels, not moving. "Hello?" I asked, poker still at my side. The man turned slowly. His eyes were sharp, even if the rest of him looked worn out. "You must be David," he said in a voice that sounded like gravel underfoot. "John said you'd arrive before dark." "Yeah, that's me." "And you are?" "Name's Randall," he replied. "I've been staying here a few months. John and Lorraine offered me a room after my surgery. Said it was the least they could do for an old friend of the family. Lorraine, of course. She was my late uncle's widow, never officially part of our bloodline, but she had somehow become permanent after Uncle Clay died. She was all pearls and smiles on the outside, but I always sensed something hard underneath. "Where's John now?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Ran into town to pick up dinner." "He said he'd be back soon." Randall tilted his head. "You look like your mother. People say that. He said you and he would be sorting some inheritance matters this weekend. That true?" I hesitated. "Something like that." Randall just nodded and turned back to the window like our conversation was over. I stood there for a moment, then backed out of the room and closed the door. Something felt wrong. Back downstairs, I poured a glass of the rye and sat in the den. John didn't return for another 40 minutes. And when he did, he was all smiles and charm, arms full of grocery bags, and calling out like nothing was off. "Dave, there you are. I thought I heard the door but didn't see your truck. Glad you made it." I stared at him for a long beat before speaking. "Who's the guy upstairs?" "Ah, Randall, old friend of Lorraine's. Vietnam vet. Got messed up pretty bad in a car accident last year. He's harmless." John set the bags down and came to clap me on the shoulder. "Come on, let's get you a drink. You're too tense." But as we stood in the kitchen and unpacked bags full of organic crap I knew he didn't actually eat, I noticed something strange. 2 folders tucked into the side pocket of his laptop case. I saw the label on one, my name. I didn't say anything right then, but I knew. Something was happening, something about me, and I wasn't going to leave until I found out what. That night passed like a slow burn under the skin. John made dinner. Well, heated it up, really. Something prepackaged and overpriced that he pretended to have cooked from scratch. We sat across from each other at the long oak table in the dining room, the same one where we used to sneak cookies as kids when Grandma wasn't looking. Everything looked the same, but it felt wrong now, like walking through a movie set made to resemble your memories. He kept the conversation light at first, joked about the roads, the weather, even asked about the garage. I played along, trying to match his energy, but I knew something was off. My name in a folder, a stranger in a wheelchair who somehow knew more about my visit than I did, and John pretending like none of this was strange. "So, about Mom's stuff," I finally said, pushing my plate away. "You said we'd be sorting it this weekend." He nodded, mouth full. Yeah. Thought we could go through the documents in the office tomorrow. There's a lot. She had bank accounts we didn't even know about, stuff Dad left her, old deeds, letters, might even be a couple of surprises. I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" He shrugged. "You'll see. Don't get all suspicious on me, Dave. I told you, I want us to do this right. Together." That was John's thing. Always selling a version of reality where he was the good guy, and he was good at it. Charming, warm, casual. But underneath that shine, there was always something calculating. Always a move being made. After dinner, I excused myself and headed to my room. The hallway felt colder somehow. I passed Randall's room. His door was open just a crack, but I heard something. Whispers. 2 voices. One was definitely his, gravelly and low. The other I couldn't place. Female, sharp. I paused, leaned in just enough to hear. "She doesn't suspect anything," the woman said. Randall chuckled. "She's smarter than she looks. But don't worry, I'll keep her in line." I frowned. Who were they talking about? Suddenly, the floor creaked beneath me, and the conversation stopped. I moved quickly, stepping away like I'd just been walking past. From inside the room, I heard the door close gently. Back in my room, I shut the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Something was happening in this house. Plans were being made, and I was clearly not meant to know about them. I couldn't sleep. Again. At around midnight, I got up, opened my door as quietly as I could, and crept down the hall. I needed to see what was in that folder. I'd seen John put the laptop bag on the bottom shelf of the living room bookshelf, like he was hiding it, but not too obviously. The living room was dark except for the faint glow from the fireplace. I moved quietly, careful not to wake anyone, or alert them if they were already awake and watching. I found the bag, unzipped the side pocket, and there it was, a manila folder labeled David M. I opened it right there on the floor. Inside were printouts, bank statements, credit scores, a background check, and a medical report I didn't recognize. There was also a sticky note on one page that read, "Confirm with Lorraine. Is he still on blood pressure meds?" I stared at it. What the hell? They were tracking me, planning something. My hands trembled as I flipped through more pages. There was an unsigned document, a draft of a shared asset agreement, listing my name, John's, and Lorraine's. It outlined a plan to combine inherited assets for the purpose of liquidation and reinvestment. In simpler terms, it meant that if I signed this, they could sell anything left to me, like Mom's lake cabin, and I wouldn't be able to do a damn thing about it. I stuffed the papers back into the folder, zipped the bag, and replaced it exactly as it was. Then I went back upstairs and didn't sleep at all. The next morning, the sky was slate gray and heavy with clouds. I made coffee in the kitchen and sat out on the back porch, watching the fog roll through the woods. The cold air helped clear my head. That's where Randall found me. He wheeled himself out silently, holding a thermos, and parked beside me like we were old friends sharing a moment. "Hell of a view," he said. "Yeah," I muttered. "Always has been." We sat in silence for a minute. Then he turned to me and said, "You found the folder, didn't you?" My stomach dropped. I didn't answer. He took a sip from his thermos. "Don't worry, I'm not here to stop you. In fact, I've been hoping you'd see it. They've been planning this for months. I turned to him slowly. What is this, Randall? What do they want from me? He gave a long sigh and looked out at the trees. Control, power, whatever's left of your mother's estate. The lake cabin is just the start. Lorraine's been pulling strings behind the scenes for years. And John? He's weak. Always has been. He'll follow whoever promises him a way to feel important. Why tell me this? I asked. Aren't you one of them? He gave me a sideways glance and said something I'll never forget. There's only so long a man can sit and watch good people get destroyed before he decides to do something about it. I didn't speak. I didn't know what to say. Randall continued. She's done this before, you know. With your uncle. With 2 other families. Manipulates her way into control, then siphons what she can until there's nothing left. John's just her latest puppet. He handed me a folded piece of paper. These are the names of the lawyers she's used. The accounts they've hidden money in. I've kept records. I looked at him, stunned. Why not go to the police? He gave a bitter smile. Because the police don't care about paper trails unless there's a body attached to them. And Lorraine's careful. But you've got a chance. She's underestimated you. The fog was lifting now, both outside and in my head. For the first time since arriving, I felt clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup, and I wasn't going to let them win. I stared at the paper in my hands long after Randall wheeled himself back inside. Names, dates, account numbers. Every detail laid out with the kind of precision only someone patient and angry could compile. I wasn't sure whether I was more stunned by the fact that he'd been building this case for years or by how coldly efficient Lorraine really was. For a while I just sat there, letting the air bite my skin, letting the betrayal settle. But it never did. It stayed raw, like a cut that hadn't even begun to scab over. Eventually, I went back into the kitchen. John was there, scrolling through his phone, looking bored. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Coffee's fresh. You sleep all right?" "Like a rock," I lied. I poured a cup, pretending to ignore the tension radiating from my own shoulders. I kept my voice level. "You said we were going to go through Mom's papers today?" He perked up. "Yep. I figured we could start in the office around 10. Lorraine's going to join us after her Pilates thing. Sound good?" "Sure," I replied. But inside, my chest was starting to burn. I didn't go to the office right away. I went up to my room, locked the door, and began making copies of Randall's papers with the old printer in the hallway closet. I stuffed them in the lining of my duffel bag between 2 changes of clothes. Then I wrote down the names and numbers he'd given me on the last page of a random car magazine I found in the nightstand drawer, just in case. By 10, I was sitting in the office with John and Lorraine, who'd just come back from her session in town. She greeted me with a smile too big to be genuine, dressed in sleek, athletic wear that made her look like she belonged in a high-end yoga retreat rather than this dusty old house. "David," she said warmly, sitting beside John and crossing her legs like she was posing for a catalog shoot. "It's so good to see you. I was worried you wouldn't come. Thanks for inviting me," I said carefully. "We just want to do this the right way," John added. "No drama, no fighting. Just sharing what Mom left us and figuring out what makes sense." He opened a binder in front of him and pulled out some forms. "This is the current list of assets, bank accounts, retirement funds, the lake property, and the old safe deposit box in Mom's name. Lorraine has a contact at the credit union who helped us get the list." I looked it over. "She left all this to me." John's face tightened. "Technically, yes. But let's be honest. Don't you think it'd be better if we shared it? I mean, you weren't even around much these past few years. I handled most of her medical stuff, took care of the paperwork. It's only fair." "That's not what the will says," Lorraine cut in smoothly. "The will was written when you 2 were still teenagers, before life changed, before your relationship with her became distant." My jaw clenched. I remembered the nights I spent with Mom at the hospital, the way she cried about John's absence, the way she said, over and over, "He always finds a way to show up when there's money." I leaned forward, planting my elbows on the desk. "What exactly do you want from me?" John's voice stayed calm, but there was a hint of steel beneath it. "We want you to agree to sign a revised estate agreement, one that divides everything equally. And if I say no?" His lips tightened. Lorraine took over. "Then we'll have to explore other options. Maybe we contest the will. Maybe we suggest mental incompetency. Your mother wasn't exactly lucid those last few months, was she? You'd lie under oath? I asked. She shrugged. Who said anything about lying? I stood up. You people are unbelievable. John rose too, hands open in that same peacekeeping gesture he always used. Dave, come on, man. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Let's just work together. For Mom. I looked at both of them. Something inside me hardened. Mom would have hated what you've become. Then I walked out. That afternoon I went back to Randall. He was waiting for me on the porch like he knew I'd be coming. So they offered you the deal, he said without even asking. They want me to sign away everything. He nodded. Lorraine's script never changes. First, she asks nicely. Then she threatens. Then she isolates. I leaned against the railing. You said she's done this before. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? He turned his wheelchair slightly to face me. Because the people she targets are tired, alone, easy to push around. But you're not. Not if you fight smart. I'm listening. He pulled a tablet from his bag. I've been recording conversations, not just hers, John's too. I have audio files, emails, messages. I even bugged the office phone line 6 months ago. My eyes widened. Why? Because I knew this day would come, he said simply. And because I knew they'd eventually try it on someone who'd fight back. He handed me the tablet. This is leverage. Use it. But don't go at them head on. Make them think they're winning. Let them get comfortable. And then we end it. That evening, I sat with John in the living room, watching a game on mute. Lorraine was in the kitchen on a video call, probably coordinating her next move. John handed me a beer. Look, man, I know you're upset. But think about it. This could be a good thing. You and me, rebuilding stuff. The lake cabin's too much for one person anyway. You really think I can't handle it? He paused. No offense, Dave, but you're not exactly rolling in cash. That place needs upkeep, insurance, taxes. What happens if you fall behind? I stared at him. So you're helping me? I'm helping both of us. I nodded slowly. Okay, let's say I think about it. What's in it for me? He smiled, like he'd won. We set up a new trust. Equal shares. You get cash up front. We sell the cabin in the spring. Maybe buy something new. Together. Clean slate. Sounds reasonable, I lied. Take your time. No pressure. But there was pressure. I could feel it in every silence, every glance from Lorraine, every fake smile. They were closing in, tightening the noose one smooth conversation at a time. But now, I had the rope, and I was ready to turn it around. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I knew Lorraine had gone into town early for one of her mysterious appointments, and John had taken the old SUV to pick up something from a storage unit he claimed held more of Mom's things. I didn't believe a word of it, but their absence gave me the opening I needed. Randall and I met in the upstairs study, a room Lorraine rarely entered. She said the dust made her sneeze, but I think the real reason was that this room had been my grandfather's, and she never liked anything that reminded her she didn't build this family from the ground up. The door clicked shut behind us. Randall wheeled himself over to the old roll-top desk and opened the drawer with the lock he had long since picked. From it, he pulled out a stack of neatly labeled flash drives, each with names and dates handwritten on masking tape. He handed me one labeled, Estate Planning Call 922. You'll want this one first, he said. It's the call where Lorraine tells her lawyer to pressure John into convincing you to sign away the cabin. She uses those words exactly. There's also mention of financial coercion. It's enough to start something legal, if that's the route you want. I took the drive and pocketed it. What's the best way to confront them? Slowly, he said. Let them feel secure. Let them lay the rest of the trap. Then you flip it. It was hard, harder than I expected, pretending I didn't know. That afternoon, I helped John clear out the attic. We laughed about some old VHS tapes we found, made jokes about our terrible haircuts in high school, and even cracked open a beer together. It felt almost normal, almost like the brothers we once were. But every time I looked at him, I saw a lie with a familiar face. That night, during dinner, Lorraine brought up the estate again. I talked with the notary, she said casually while spearing asparagus on her plate. He can come by tomorrow morning. That way, We can finalize things before the weekend ends. Clean and easy. John glanced at me. We thought it might be good to just get it all wrapped up. I nodded slowly. Sure, I'll sign. Lorraine blinked. You will? Yeah, I said, trying not to grit my teeth. You're right. It's better for everyone. Less tension. She smiled like a shark. But, I added, I'd like us all to sit down and go over the paperwork first. Together, line by line, no surprises. She hesitated, but John chimed in quickly. Of course, that's fair. Good, I said. Tomorrow morning then. That night, I met Randall in the study again. We reviewed the files, planned the confrontation, and rehearsed the steps. You know this is going to get ugly, he warned. I'm counting on it, I said. The next morning was crisp and clear. Lorraine wore a tailored blazer and heels like she was heading to a courtroom. John looked a little pale, like the guilt was catching up with him. We sat in the dining room. The notary, a thin, older man with a briefcase full of stamps and seals, sat up at the head of the table. Lorraine slid a thick folder toward me. Here's the final version, she said, beaming. Just review and sign. We've already gone over it 100 times. Not with me, you haven't. I opened the folder and flipped through the first few pages, letting the silence grow. I could feel their eyes watching me, trying to read my face. Then I pulled out my phone, set it on the table, and hit play on the recording Randall had transferred the night before. Lorraine's voice filled the room. Just make sure he doesn't get suspicious. We only need his signature. After that, the cabin's ours and John can transfer it cleanly. If David resists, suggest he's unstable. Mention his financials, his meds. We'll make it stick. The room went still. Even the notary froze mid-page turn. John's face went white. Lorraine didn't flinch. She simply reached for her glass of water and took a slow sip. I don't know where you got that, she said calmly. But it's inadmissible without consent. North Carolina law is very specific. I leaned forward. I'm not taking you to court. I just want you to know I know. Her eyes narrowed. Then why play it? To see what you do when cornered. She smiled faintly. You've grown a spine. And you've run out of shadows, I replied. I stood up, took the unsigned documents, and ripped them clean in half. The notary quietly packed up his things. Wait in the car, Lorraine said to John, not even looking at him. John hesitated, then obeyed, like a scolded child. She turned back to me, all politeness gone. You think this is over? I looked her straight in the eye. No. I think it's finally starting. Randall and I spent the rest of the day locking down everything. I transferred the cabin deed to a secure trust with a lawyer in town. I froze the remaining accounts connected to Mom's estate. Randall handed off a package of documents to a friend in the DA's office, just in case Lorraine tried to retaliate. By sunset, the house felt lighter. Still old, still haunted, but not by lies anymore. Just memories. Randall sat beside me on the porch, sipping a dark lager. You did good today. I had help, he smiled. You're not the first person she tried to destroy, but you might be the last. I leaned back in the chair, watching the last rays of light disappear behind the hills. Let's hope so. The morning after everything blew up, the house was eerily quiet again, but not with the same tension it held before. It was the quiet of something broken, of a silence that came after people had shown who they truly were. John didn't speak to me when I passed him in the hallway that morning. He barely looked up from the suitcase he was zipping shut, stuffing clothes inside with the same mechanical detachment you'd use to sweep dust under a rug. He and Lorraine were leaving that afternoon. Early, they said. Too much going on back home to stay the weekend. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Let them run. I spent the rest of the morning helping Randall sort through the physical files he had stashed in every corner of the study. It was astonishing how much he'd kept. Emails, property assessments, tax statements, hidden accounts under shell corporations, and even voice memos Lorraine had carelessly dictated near him. She always thought I was half-deaf, he said, chuckling softly as he labeled a folder, L. Whitmore, third-party transfers. I learned to sit real still and just absorb everything. People say the most damning things when they think you're powerless. You sure did, I said, handing him another stack of documents. You waited all this time. Why not take them down yourself? He paused. Because I was too close, and I knew I'd become part of the fire if I lit the match. But you You were different. You still had something to lose, and something worth saving. That hit me harder than I expected. Around noon, Randall gave me a key I hadn't seen before. It was small, brass, and old, wrapped in a cloth. "What's this?" "The safe deposit box," he said. "Your mother's, the one she never told anyone about." I raised an eyebrow. "How did you get this?" "She trusted me more than she let on. Gave it to me the night before she passed. Said to give it to you when the time was right." My hands tightened around the key. "Why didn't she give it to me directly?" "Because she knew John would sniff it out before you ever got to open it. She wanted to protect you, even from him." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just nodded. Grief bubbled up again, but it wasn't the fresh wound of 2 months ago. It was older, deeper, knowing she had spent her final days still guarding against the people she should have been able to trust. I went into town that afternoon. The safe deposit box was at a small regional bank, the kind of place where tellers still knew people by name. The woman at the front desk smiled as she took my ID and the key. "Right this way, Mr. Mercer," she said. The box was small, metal, and heavier than I expected. I carried it into the private room, closed the door behind me, and opened it with cautious hands. Inside, I found a sealed letter addressed to me in my mother's handwriting, a flash drive in a tiny plastic case, and a velvet pouch containing a simple gold locket, one I hadn't seen since I was a child. I opened the letter first. It read, "David, if you're reading this, it means you've seen enough to understand what I couldn't protect you from. I'm sorry for that. I tried. But sometimes love isn't enough to stop the ones who want to take everything. I've hidden what I could. The flash drive contains records, ones I couldn't keep in the house because I knew John would go looking. Inside it, you'll find proof of things Lorraine did, not just to this family, but to others. If you want justice, this is where it starts." The locket belonged to your grandmother. She gave it to me on the day I got married, told me to pass it on when the time was right. I think that time is now. Not because it's worth anything in dollars, but because it's proof that something real, something good passed through these hands before everything fell apart. You were always the heart of this family, even when no one said it out loud. And hearts are worth protecting. Love always, Mom. I sat in that small room for a long time, reading the letter again and again, not crying, just feeling every inch of loss, of anger, of clarity. Then I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It was all there. Emails between Lorraine and property developers trying to fast-track shady land deals, bank transfers to offshore accounts, photos of documents Lorraine had manipulated to redirect inherited funds from family trusts, and a series of dated video recordings, hidden phone camera clips, of arguments between John and Lorraine, where he clearly showed hesitation, fear, and eventually full compliance. She had dirt on him, and he knew it. That's why he followed her blindly. That's why he gave in so easily. I copied the entire contents to a new secure cloud drive and an external hard drive I kept in my truck. One copy to show, one to keep. By the time I got back to the house, their car was gone. A note had been left on the kitchen counter, in John's handwriting. "David, guess I misjudged you, or maybe you just grew up when I wasn't looking. Take care of the house, and thanks for not burning it down. Jay." It wasn't an apology, but maybe it was the closest thing I'd get. Randall and I sat out on the porch again that evening. No words were needed for a while. Just the sound of wind through the trees and the slow creaking of the rocking chairs. "You think they'll try anything else?" I finally asked. Randall took a sip from his coffee. "Lorraine might. She doesn't like losing. But John? I think he's finally tired of the game. And you? What now?" He looked out across the yard. "Maybe I leave this chair behind. Move somewhere warmer. Find a place where I don't have to pretend anymore. You earned that." He nodded. "And you earned something too." "What's that?" "Your name back. Your peace. Maybe even your future." I sat back and watched the sun disappear behind the hills, and for the first time in years, I believed that maybe he was right. The days that followed passed in quiet waves. I stayed at the house longer than planned. I told myself it was to take care of the paperwork, the cleanup, the transition. But really, I just needed time. Time to sit with everything I'd learned. Time to understand who I was now that the curtain had been pulled back on my family's darkest corners. I split most of my hours between the porch and the study. In the mornings, I made strong coffee and walked the property like I used to as a kid, down to the broken fence behind the barn, across the old creek bed where John once dared me to jump and broke his arm trying. It felt different now. Not smaller, like people always say about their childhood places, but more honest, like the land had always known what the people living on it were hiding, and now, finally, it didn't have to anymore. Randall stayed another week, said he'd stick around until things were in order. We worked side by side, quietly efficient, two men from different generations but bound by a shared war neither of us signed up for. He helped me catalog the rest of the documents from the safe deposit box, and together we compiled a full report. Financial trails, voice recordings, and enough corroborating evidence to not just scare Lorraine, but to shut down her operations for good. On the 5th day, I made an appointment with a lawyer in Asheville, someone I trusted, someone who used to work with my mom during her years managing charitable trusts. Her name was Judith Lane, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her early 60s with reading glasses that she never actually used and a memory like a steel trap. Judith looked over the files slowly and methodically, asking only a few questions. When she got to the emails and offshore account references, her lips pressed into a thin, approving line. "You've got her," she said. "You think it's enough? It's more than enough. She's been running a classic funnel scheme through marital partnerships, tied to manipulation of estate assets. I can get this in front of the right people." "What about John?" Judith hesitated. "He's in deep, but from the recordings, it's clear he was coerced at first. He could cooperate. Maybe even turn state's evidence if we play this smart." I nodded. "Let me think about it." Back at the house that night, Randall and I lit a fire in the old stone pit out back. We didn't talk much, just sat there, beer bottles in hand, watching the embers drift into the night. "You still love him, don't you?" Randall asked. I didn't answer right away. "He's my brother," I said finally. "Even now, but I don't trust him, and I don't think I ever really will again." Randall nodded. "It's okay to feel both. Love doesn't cancel out betrayal. It just makes it hurt more." He tossed a twig into the fire, and we both watched it vanish in a pop of sparks. On the 7th day, John called. It was early morning. I was on the porch, coffee steaming in my hands, fog still rising from the fields. His name flashed on the screen, and for a long moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But I didn't. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he replied. His voice was low, hoarse, like he hadn't slept in days. "You at the house?" "Still am." A pause. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know it would go that far. I didn't know she'd use you like that. You let her." "I know." Another long silence passed. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For real. You deserved better." I didn't answer. Not right away. Because sorry, when it came from him, always came with conditions. But for once, it sounded like maybe he meant it. Maybe. "I'm not pressing charges," I said finally. "But if Judith comes calling and you don't cooperate, you'll regret it." "I will," he said quietly. "I promise. I already gave her what she asked for." I raised my eyebrows. "You're working with her?" "Started yesterday." That was the most surprising part of the whole story so far. He cleared his throat. "Look, I'm not going back to Atlanta. I sold my part in the last company. I'm staying with a friend out in Raleigh for a while. I'm going to try to fix my life." "Do that," I said. He hesitated. "You'll keep the cabin, right? You won't sell it? It was never hers to take." He exhaled. "Yeah, that's good." Then softer. "Take care of yourself, Dave." I didn't say goodbye. I just ended the call and sat back in the chair, letting the sound of morning birds take the space his voice left behind. Randall stepped onto the porch a few minutes later, saw the phone in my hand, and nodded once, as if he already knew who had called. "Clean break?" he asked. "Close enough," I said. That afternoon I went to the lake. It was still, reflective, just like I remembered. I stood on the dock for a long time with Mom's letter in my jacket pocket and the gold locket wrapped in my fist. I didn't cry, but I let the wind carry the weight I'd been holding, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt light enough to breathe without effort. Back at the house, Randall was packed. "I won't say goodbye," he said, shaking my hand. "Just until next time." Where will you go? Someplace warm. Maybe Arizona. I hear they don't ask too many questions out there. I laughed. I'll miss you, man. He smiled. No, you won't. You'll be too busy living. Then he rolled himself into the back of the rideshare van that would take him to the bus station. I stood there for a long time after he was gone. That night I lit the fireplace alone. Just me, the quiet of the house, and the sound of logs crackling. I opened my mother's locket and stared at the tiny photo inside. Her on one side, me and John as kids on the other. There was a lock of hair folded beneath the frame. Hers, maybe. Or Grandma's. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was real. Untouched by lies. Untouched by schemes. And for the first time in my life, I realized that maybe I could build something of my own. Something honest. Something permanent. The fire flickered, and I didn't feel alone anymore. The following weeks passed like a slow and careful unfolding. Life didn't magically fix itself just because the villains had been pushed back into the shadows. No, real healing moves quieter than that. It's stubborn, like a splinter working its way out of the skin. I stayed at the house through the early winter. Something in me needed to sit with it, to reclaim the place room by room. I changed out curtains that had grown stiff with age, aired out closets heavy with mothballs, polished the wood floors until they shone the way they had when Grandma ruled this house with a wooden spoon and a will of iron. I didn't touch Mom's room though, not at first. That would come later. In the meantime, I got the garage doors working again, repaired the roof over the tool shed, even managed to clean the old pontoon boat parked at the edge of the lake, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd get her running again by spring. It felt good. Manual labor always had a way of stitching my mind back together after too many emotional battles. On clear days, I drove into town. I found an old diner on Main Street where the coffee tasted like motor oil and the pancakes were the size of hubcaps. The locals were friendly in the slow, cautious way of small towns. They asked polite questions about who I was, whose boy I might be, what brought me back to the area. I answered honestly. My name's David Mercer. My family had a place out by Bell Creek. I'm fixing it up. And every time I said it, I believed it a little more. The house wasn't just where my story had ended. It was where it was starting over. About a month after John's call, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple sheet of paper, handwritten in John's messy scrawl. Dave, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I figured you deserved to know. Lorraine's under investigation. They froze her accounts. She's going to fight it, of course, but it's not looking good for her. I told them everything, even stuff you don't know about. Maybe it won't fix what I broke, but I had to try. Hope you're finding some peace out there. John. I read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it into the drawer of the roll-top desk where Randall's files used to live. I didn't call him, didn't write back. Some things didn't need a response. The important part wasn't that John apologized. It was that I no longer needed his apology to move forward. One particularly cold Saturday morning, I decided it was finally time. I opened the door to Mom's room. It smelled like lavender and dust. The air inside was thicker, like it hadn't been disturbed in years instead of months. Her bed was still neatly made, the quilt she'd sewn by hand draped across it. On the dresser sat her jewelry box, a few framed photos, and a worn paperback she must have been reading before the hospital stays took over. I didn't pack anything away that day. I didn't donate her clothes or box up her memories. I just sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the hand-stitched quilt, and let myself miss her. Really miss her. Not the guilt-driven, angry mourning I'd been doing since her funeral. Not the confused, betrayed grief after learning everything about John and Lorraine. But pure, simple sorrow for a woman who had loved the best she could with the tools life gave her, and who, even now, was still protecting me in her own way. That night, I lit a single candle by her picture in the living room and made a promise out loud, my voice steady even if my hands trembled. I'm going to make something good here, Mom. Something you'd be proud of. I promise. The flame flickered, steady against the dark, and I knew she heard me. In the months that followed, I started turning the lake property into something new. Not a rental, not a tear down, but a real, working place again. I started with the boathouse, reinforcing the dock, getting the engines repaired, hiring a couple of local kids to help when I could afford it. Word spread quickly in town, and soon people started stopping by. "Could you help me fix my engine?" someone asked. "Think you'll rent boats next summer?" another wondered. The idea grew slowly, like moss on a stone. By spring, Mercer Lake Outfitters was born. A small, honest business built out of the ruins of betrayal and loss. Fishing trips, boat repairs, rentals, a little bait shop that sold sandwiches so bad they were charming. And somehow I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, building, thriving. The house came alive with it, no longer a mausoleum of the past, but a living place. I painted the porch swing a ridiculous shade of red, hung string lights across the trees near the lake, even hosted a 4th of July fish fry that had the whole town buzzing for weeks. People who barely knew me began calling me one of their own, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I was. Summer came full and bright that year, with the smell of fresh grass and lake water filling the air. Business at Mercer Lake Outfitters picked up more than I ever expected. Families rented boats for weekend adventures. Fishermen swapped tall tales over cold sodas. And kids squealed with laughter when they caught their first fish off the dock I'd rebuilt with my own 2 hands. Every now and then, I'd catch myself standing outside the bait shop or leaning against the railing of the new dock, just watching life happen around me. No lies, no schemes, just honest living. And every time, a smile tugged at the corner of my mouth without me even realizing it. Randall sent postcards from his travels. One from Arizona, showing the red canyons and clear skies. Another from New Mexico with a picture of a flea market so full of life I could almost hear the music through the paper. He kept his messages short, but always ended them the same way. "Keep living, Dave. You earned it." I kept the postcards pinned above the workbench in my office, a constant reminder that good things could come after the worst storms. John didn't reach out again, and I didn't expect him to. News traveled slow but sure, and eventually I heard through town that Lorraine's court battles dragged on longer than she probably ever imagined they would. Her assets were frozen, her reputation in ruins, and John, last anyone knew, was working construction jobs down in Raleigh, trying to live quietly for once in his life. Part of me ached for the brother I once had, but most of me knew better than to wait for ghosts to come walking back. I had a life now, a good one, built from the ashes of everything they tried to burn. One late evening in August, after a full day on the water helping a young couple learn to fish, I sat on the porch with a cold beer, watching the sun sink into the lake like a copper coin melting into velvet. The gold locket lay around my neck, hidden under my t-shirt, a quiet weight against my chest. Mom's photo pressed close to my heart. I thought about everything that had happened, about the betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger that nearly broke me apart, and then about the strength that had grown in its place, about the friends I had made, the home I had rebuilt, piece by piece, with my own hands, the family I was forming, not from blood, but from loyalty, kindness, and choice. And I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, building, thriving, just like she always wanted for me. Before I finish telling you my story, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about family, loyalty, betrayal, or even just about finding your own strength when life tries to tear you down, I invite you to become part of our community here. Please hit that subscribe button. It means more than you can imagine. We're building a place where real stories are honored, where strength and resilience are celebrated, and where every voice matters. I'd love to hear your story too. Drop a comment below telling us, have you ever faced betrayal from someone close? How did you find your way back to yourself? What did you learn from the experience? Your experiences matter. They can help someone else who might be going through something similar right now. And if you enjoyed this video, let us know. What part hit you the hardest? What part made you stop and think? Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that new beginnings are possible, even when everything seems lost. I'll see you in the next story. Stay strong. Stay true. Until next time.